One of my best friends constantly cuts people off mid-sentence, sometimes when the person is answering the question that she has literally asked.
I've actually just had a moment of self-awareness when I came to your house to watch I Am a Celeb and I kept showing you photos of Africa. Fuck, I'm this person. I'm so sorry.
One of my best friends constantly cuts me off or cuts people off mid-sentence, sometimes when the person is answering the question that she has literally asked them. She also will cut into people's conversations and start talking about something completely unrelated, showing pictures on her phone or something else she saw on there, taking the conversation away from what people were talking about and making it hard to get the original chat back on track. Now that I've noticed she does this, I just can't stop noticing it. It drives me mental and makes me not want to have a deep, engaged conversation with her, as it seems like she's not properly listening or interested in what I have to say. Is there a way to politely tell her that she does this, or is this a quirk of her personality that I just need to let go?
This is such an uncomfortable question for me to answer because I have been your friend and I've had this exact situation unfold where I was needing to be accountable for some kind of shitty behavior. The first thing I want you to ask is whether you think this interrupting and this kind of like breaking of conversation is intentional. Because I think this is one of the situations where intention actually really does matter. Giving a little bit of context, it is a symptom of ADHD that I wasn't aware of until I was diagnosed. And that's kind of how this whole thing came about within my own personal life. I didn't realize that I was so bad for interrupting people's conversation, because in my mind, I thought it showed that I was excited about the conversation and that I had something to add to it and that I wanted more, like that was my way of kind of engaging. And I didn't have any self-awareness at all as to how rude it was or how it had the ability to make people feel really diminished.
I think it's the big and important part of this is how it can take a conversation off track.
Yes.
And I know, like, Keeshia, I have seen such a difference in you, and I mean this with all deep kindness, I truly do, but I've seen such a difference in you since you have been diagnosed, and you've gone through being medicated in some way and figuring all that out. Like, there was, and like, it never ever was it an issue. Never was it like, oh my God, Keeshia, like
it might not have been an issue for you, but it definitely was for other people in my life. And I feel really embarrassed about it. And that's why I kind of want to ask you about your friend, because for me, like I actually, this is so incredibly embarrassing. And for anyone who's been through an ADHD diagnosis, you'll know this. You sit across from your psychiatrist and they ask you the question of how do you go at turn taking in conversation? And you're like, am I 3?
You're like, I talk for the whole conversation.
I'm like, what? What do you mean? Like, and it's meant to be a tennis match. And I truly actually mean this. And this is why I think you need to ask about the intention. I had no idea that this is something that I did. And I felt really embarrassed when I became aware of it. So I think there is a really big difference between whether your friend is aware of the fact that they're doing this. If they are aware and they don't care, it's fucking rude.
Yeah.
Like, and you shouldn't be friends with someone who only cares about themselves in that way. I think it might just be worth you investigating. Firstly, I really want to validate you. It is so reasonable that this pisses you off and that this makes you annoyed and not want to have conversations, because it makes you feel as though what you've got to say is less important.
Totally.
But it's not necessarily a personality trait of theirs. It may be. There are a couple of ways that you can bring their attention to it. And if I was to recommend some, one-on-one, please don't do this in a group environment. It's really, really embarrassing when that happens. It also will most likely make your friend feel guilty. And I think what you can kind of approach it with is like, look, I just wanted to bring this up with you and make you aware of the fact that this is how I've felt some conversations have been with you. And I want to know whether it's because you don't think what I've got to say is important. And that will give them the opportunity to tell you that what you do have to say is important to them. And the other thing that I really recommend is not saying that other people have noticed it. Because when you're in the position of being the one who's in the wrong here and you feel as though everyone has been thinking and feeling this about you, you just feel like the worst person. Like you actually feel really ashamed of yourself. And it's not something like, if you're not doing it intentionally, it's not an evil thing. You're not trying to hurt people.
It's also incredibly triangulating when using that. It doesn't matter what the conversation is or what the argument is, saying other people have said the same or other people have thought the same or other people have said this to me. Any of those variations of that same context, all you're saying to that person is we've been talking about you behind your back. That's what that says. And you don't need to use other people's observations as ammunition to make a point to your friend. It's a cruel way of approaching conversation. And I'm not saying that you were going to do that either. I think it gives good context to the question that you've asked. But this is more so just around how to approach it with your friend and what parts to share with her from a place of kindness and empathy versus what would become and be seen as being super argumentative or being seen as combative even. The only thing I want to add to that, Keish, because I think your perspective on it is so important. I don't think it is a normal trait of someone, like a personality trait, to just be a chronic interrupter. I would say that more often than not, it does lend itself to someone who does have some sort of, maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's some sort of communication issues, because especially if they show up as a great friend in every other way, that would indicate that they are invested in you. They do care about what you have to say. They are a friend who is absolutely clocked in on the friendship. So then it's not congruent for them to turn around and go, oh, but I don't care what you say and I'm just going to interrupt you. That to me seems like it is just, and I don't want to say part of their personality, but it's part of the way in which they communicate, whether that is right or wrong. But I can understand why it is really, really frustrating. I think the hardest one for me is it's not so much the being interrupted, it's the deviating of the conversation away from what it is that the group is talking about. That can be really, really hard because the other person doesn't understand, like the person who's doing it, they might even feel like, oh, I tried to say something. You guys aren't listening to me. And it's like, yeah, we're not listening to you because you're not talking about the thing that we're talking about. So like,
oh my gosh, I've actually just had a moment of self-awareness when I came to your house to watch I Am a Celeb and I kept showing you photos of Africa. Fuck, I'm this person. I'm so sorry.
The memory I have, and this is the only time that I had noticed because like, Keish, you don't do it. And I don't want you to leave this conversation having like this deep, like, oh my God.
But truly, it is something that I actually feel a lot of shame about.
But you don't need to feel shame about it.
Well, I've been trying to work on it. And obviously it's not perfect.
Self-awareness is a beautiful thing. No, I want to be so clear because in no way do I want you to leave this conversation thinking as though that the way in which you communicate is a problem. Do you know what I mean? You're a great communicator. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows that you can talk for England, but also you listen for England too. You know, like you are very perceptive around what's going on. But I think that sometimes, and this is what I mean by maybe it's an indication of someone who does have ADHD, is that if you get it in your head that you want to talk about something, it doesn't matter what the other conversation is that's happening here. It has to be talked about right now.
It's like a bulldozer.
Do you remember when we had the live shows and we were all in the bus? I can't remember what we were talking about, but you wanted to tell everyone about the fact that you grew up in Tweed, or you spent a lot of time in Tweed as we were driving towards.
No, I didn't. I mean, I have no, this is what I mean.
But that's the
I
only
have no awareness of this.
Like, what are you talking about?
So I have
like,
no awareness of this. And yes, I did used to spend a little bit of time. I did my university degree on the Gold Coast.
It's a beautiful spot. Tweed is gorgeous.
I mean, it's not.
But I also understand why that's time sensitive because we're driving through an area. So like you want to be like, oh, this is because you're going to drive past it and then it's not going to be there anymore. But at the same time, it's like, are they, is there another conversation that's happening here that has to be interrupted for that? And I think it's like, take a second to have a look at your friend's overall behavior and are there other indicators that might show that she has other things going on in her personality? Are there other small indicators? And maybe it's good to kind of like do a little bit of read up on ADHD, for example. So you can be like, oh yeah, you know what? Wow, she does have a few of these other things as well. This might be a moment where she has self-reflection in her own life and kind of realizes that there are some things that she struggles with that have become so normal to her that she's not even conscious of. Or it might be something that she's absolutely in denial about and it's not actually a problem for her, or maybe she doesn't have it and it is just something that she does. There's many ways in which this could unfold, but I think it is okay of you to have a conversation with her about it, especially if it makes you feel like this.
Yeah, I also just to end this conversation, I also want to say that if that is the case, let's say that actually she is similar to me, had no idea that this is something that she does really badly and it was symptomatic of something else. Even if she is to be diagnosed, and I'm really, really strong talking about this because I don't think everyone feels this way, it's not an excuse. Even though I have ADHD and I have a tendency to interrupt people, that's actually my responsibility to try and work on because it has the effect of hurting people. So it's not like a get out of jail free card of I've got a condition, I can do whatever the fuck I want and say what I want in conversation and you just have to get over it. It does give you more context that you know it's not malicious. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit of a better place to start the conversation because you have an understanding of the fact that they're not meaning to do it, but they also need to take accountability for the fact that they have done it and they need to work on it.
Keeshia, just one thing I want to ask you in terms of a personal reaction/response. When your friend brought it up with you and made it aware to you that this is how you were behaving, how did you respond to that and how did that make you feel?
I had it happen twice. One was with a friend and one was with my boyfriend. And not well. I didn't respond well because I felt attacked.
Defensive?
So incredibly defensive, and I have enough awareness of it now, and this has been a benefit of medication for me. I'm able to zoom out and be less personally offended and go, they had a really good point. They both had such a point. They both had multiple examples, but at the time I was like, this is just an attack on my character because I didn't mean to do it. I felt like I was I thought I was trying to engage with you. I thought I was trying to get more and add to the conversation, not take away from it. And I didn't realize that.
Or making it about yourself. You're I wasn't trying to. I was trying to use my life experience to empathize with you, as a comparison instead of just listening.
Yeah. And so initially, your friend probably will be. That's why I think it's really important that you do this in such a soft way. I think it's probably best if you do it when you say it, you kind of constantly notice it. So it's probably not going to be long before it happens again. And if I were you or if I was kind of reversing it and saying how I think it would be best, if it happens in the moment, I think that's when I'd bring it up. And I think I'd go, hey, can we just stop for a second? I really wanted to talk to you about this and I just felt like you really interrupted me. And I just want to make you aware of that because sometimes I feel not listened to in our conversations and I feel like you dominate the conversation a bit. And I just wanted to kind of broach that with you. I think, I understand why you're like, this drives me mental. It's so rude and it cuts off conversation. But please figure out first whether your friend is kind of deliberately doing it. If they're just a really self-involved, selfish person, I'd probably be decreasing the friendship.
Yeah, and that's a whole different response.
Yeah.
But I think there'll be other indicators of that, not just the cutting off thing.
Yeah.